sight of the touch or the scent of the sand or the strength of an oak roots deep in the ground. The wonder of flowers to be covered and then to burst up through tarmac to the sun again, or to fly to the sun without burning a wing, to lie in a meadow and hear the grass sing, to have all these things in our memories stored, and to use them to help us
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of Stories of the Dark. I am your host, Glen Clark, and my apologies for not being on in the last couple of days. The internet decided it wanted to have a mind of its own and not let me do any kind of recording or broadcasting for that matter, so we're giving it a shot tonight, so hopefully everything works out. Anyway, this edition is going to be about reincarnation, past lives. If any of you have any stories or any beliefs in that, please comment or send me your stories to either my YouTube channel or to email, which is storiesofthedark1@gmail.com. Or you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. The links will be posted on the video. So anyway, I'm going to be reading some stories, just some short stories of reincarnation. I'm sure at some point in our lives we've all had times where either we've gone somewhere or we've seen something and we think, I've been there before, I've seen that before. I know I've had a couple of experiences like that, but, it's just hard to say what it is or anything like that. It could very well be a past life. It very well could be something else. You just never know. Anyway, the first, I'm going to just, like I said, I'm just going to be reading some stories here, and then afterwards maybe talk about it a little bit, and then we'll get it to where you, the listener, can be involved as well as we go along here. Like I said in the last edition, I'm still new at this, so if I make some mistakes, please bear with me. So. Anyway, all right, let's get started. This comes from the website Ranker.com. It was written by, it says, 21 people described their creepiest past life stories. It was written by a woman by the name of Amanda Sedlak-Heavener. So you can go to Ranker.com and take a look at that. So anyway, it says here, many people believe in reincarnation, so the idea that their souls or spirits or whatever you wish to call them lived many lives in the past isn't completely a foreign concept. Undergoing past life regression can help bring up memories of these former lives, some of which are quite scary. The creepy stories compiled here from Reddit, all of past lives and odd memories may help you come up with a few theories of your own. And here's a story here. It's called Made the Baby Go Away. Not necessarily a past life, but my friend had a miscarriage before she had her son. He had no idea about her miscarriage and was about 6 when he said the following. Remember the baby you had in your belly? I made them go away so you could be my mommy. This child also saw spirits in mirrors until he was in about the 5th grade. Very interesting there. And most of the time, children are very, very open to past lives and reincarnation. Some of the best stories I've ever heard seem like that they came from children. So there again, it's hard to tell. I mean, kids, I've always found to be more reliable when it comes to stories like that of ghosts, anything to do with spirits, anything like that. Because children are more I guess you could say, more susceptible or more open to that than, say, us adults. So anyway, the next story here is called Memories of a Car Crash. It says, I still have a very short memory of a dream, although I can't remember actually having the dream, just the dream itself. It starts with a woman in my dream who self-identifies as my mother, screaming for my safety. I turn around from whatever I was doing on the dirt road in a busy city to see the terror on her face. Excuse me for the stumbling. I was looking at one of my other devices that I use for music that you hear on the program. So, anyway, continuing, then something crashes into me. I immediately get upset about the extremely consequential accident. I had plans and strategies for this life, and now I had to start over. Based off the angle of my vision in this little scene, I can guess my height and say that the dream figure was probably about 6 or 7, although the fact that it was a dirt road in a busy city makes me think it was India or something, although I can't say for sure that what the skin tone of the mother was. It might have helped. Also, this sounds like a fatal car crash, but the road was a dirt road, which seems really weird. I have a slight memory of looking out of a window at a small walled courtyard, feeling some pride about it and the dozens or maybe up to 100 people who used it, many of whom were my offspring, and smiling a goodbye blessing. I remember as a very small child spending a long time trying to remember why I had chosen to be born this time as a girl, since everything that I was learning about the world seemed to tell me that it was categorically better to be a boy instead. Oddly, I had no idea what gender I was in the 2 memories of death. I also remember thinking it was kind of unfair to compare me with some of the other elementary school students because I could just remember things while they were learning them for the first time. I also remember trying to ask my mother about these memories, but being careful just in case she didn't believe in life before birth. She didn't, so I didn't ask anything more detailed. That was the end of that story. Should have been a little bit longer story, but yeah, it seemed like I'd like to have heard more about that one. Anyway, the next story here is entitled, Now You're the Dad. My son said something to me when I was 2 or 2.5 years old. We were on top of the stairs while I was fixing... I'm going to start this one over again. Anyway, it says, my son said something to me when he was 2 to 2.5 years old. We were on top of the stairs while I was fixing something, can't remember what, and he said to me, funny, me or daddy, now you daddy. I'd be about 29 to 30 by then, and my father died when I was 11. He only said it that once, and I've never told him. Never told anyone apart from my best friend about 20 years ago. Yeah, kind of interesting, again, kind of short, but, that's just, I guess that's just how some of these stories go. Anyway, the next story I'll read for you before we go to a break is called "They Helped Fix Grandpa Somehow and Somehow Spoke German." When my daughter was 3, she told me several times that she knew me, my sister, my mother, and my dad before she was here now. She said all of us women wore white dresses and worked in a white tent with red crosses on it. She said we all helped fix Grandpa after he got poomed, her word for gun sounds when she was little. She also told me that we have taken turns being the mommy. She said I was doing a good job this time. I've actually accidentally called her mommy a couple of times when I was really tired. My little boy spoke what sounded like German as a baby without hearing it before, and when he was older, we got a German babysitter that was surprised that we only spoke English because he was speaking Low German at her house. So I think I'll share one more story before we go to a break. We got plenty of time here. So anyway, here the next one is called "Nightmares of Being Run Over by a Bus." I fully believe in past lives. My parents told me that up until about age 6 that I used to have horrible recurring nightmares of being run over by a bus along a certain stretch of road near to where my grandparents lived. It was only when I was in my teens that they told me this, that my great aunt was knocked down and killed by a bus, age 6, along that exact stretch of road. I don't really have any of my own memories about it, apart from the recurring dreams about that stretch of road that I still have. I don't get knocked down, but I always seem to be there. Interesting. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and take a quick break here. So we'll be right back, play a little music for you, and I'll be back in just a few. This is, and that's the sound of me turning the sound up so you can actually hear music. Anyway, I'll be right back. This is Stories of the Dark. I am your host, Glen Clark. welcome back to Stories of the Dark. I am your host, Glen Clark, and that was at least part of Nirvana, Come As You Are. Unfortunately, the internet decided it wanted to be a little slow and not play the whole song, but that's okay. We can improvise there and move forward. Anyway, continuing on with the stories. We got the next one is called Creepy Memories of Being Burned Alive. I've seen a me that doesn't look like me drown in a very cold, deep water, repeatedly since I was very young. I've always had a morbid draw to the Titanic. Before you ask, I was born way before the movie. I've seen another me burn alive, feeling the fire burn and blister, watching people watch me burn. I used to wake up screaming as a child that they were burning me to death. I've had an emotional connection to places I've never been, never seen before. That's another short one there. So, again, these are kind of short, so if you want to look at the website and check things out, again, it's Ranker.com. Just kind of go in, and they may have different links, and they have, looks like where you can click on different things and maybe go to like more of the story or something like that. But anyway, the next story here is called Irrational Fears and Past Lives. I've often wondered if it's a past life kind of thing when a child has a irrational fear of something before they can talk. My niece, for example, as a toddler, she was afraid of anyone going into the bathroom alone. She would scream no at the door. She was fine if you left the door open, though. My stepson is terrified of lakes and water spraying on him. Having a bath is fine, playing in the sink is fine, but deeper water over his waist, waves and water falling on him, shower head, rain, water falling from the roof after it rains, etc., freaks him right out. I remember as a child, too, having a recurring dream where I was a different girl. I remember seeing myself in the mirror brushing my hair, that hearing a fire alarm and not being able to find my way out while I could hear my mom calling my name. Next thing I remember is being above my body while it was charred and bloody. Then being wheeled out of the house. I even still remember the full layout of the house. On the stretcher by the paramedics in a body bag, still from the view of looking at myself from above. I remember being no more than 5 or 6 telling my mom about these dreams. My mom just remarked about them being silly, but it always bothered me. Sorry I started rambling, but just a few things I always think of with this subject. Again, this is, I'm sure this is from that Amanda, the author, Amanda something. Anyway, the next story is called A Car Hit Her While She Was Playing. My little cousin lived in my pink house down that road and could tell anyone about her entire family of 6 siblings. She also said that she remembered while she was playing in a street that a car hit her and everyone was sad. Interesting. So again, a lot of these seem to come from children. As I said before, children are more susceptible to this kind of stuff, and children are the most reliable when it comes to anything paranormal. If a child says they see a ghost, or a lot of times too, children that have imaginary friends could actually be seeing something that we as adults may not otherwise see. And so the whole imaginary friend, I know we've all had one growing up and whatever, although I don't remember having one. Other people, other children have. So I mean, it's very possible that it could be could be very well somebody there that they don't actually, that we don't actually see. And a lot of times we don't believe the children because we think that, they're, of course, not telling the truth because they're kids and they like to make stories. But, sometimes it's good to take a better look and, listen to children because they can be very spot on. But anyway, the next story goes, he pointed out where he died. I was around 10 years old, and at the time my brother was 6. We were driving across the bridge, and out of nowhere my brother says, "Look, Mommy, I died right over there." And he points towards the railing of the bridge. Kind of freaked me out, and my mom out pretty hard. Years later, I've asked my brother if he remembers what he said, and he doesn't. Anyway, that's, see, again, children. So, the next one here is dreamed of a Gettysburg battlefield. I knew a guy who thought all things paranormal were nonsense and laughed at the mere thought there could be truth to anything outside what was accepted. He told me a story of his, though, that really surprised me. He was in his late 50s, and his entire life, for as long as he can remember, he had a dream he was standing in a field. It was always the exact same layout, rolling hills. He could see the tree line from his vantage point. The only real landmarks were a lone tree and a wooden fence. Every time during the dream he felt as if he was a young boy and could feel that there was a large group of me with him, seemingly behind him. He never told a soul, not his wife nor his kids. One day he took his family to Gettysburg while on vacation. That exact vantage point was the Union high water line during the battle. It definitely disturbed him, but he still refused to consider it as being paranormal. The next story is called What Grave Was I In? I'm a little late to the discussion, but my son has said a few things that reminds me of the thread you mentioned. Several months ago, my son was 3. My husband and I were talking about our wedding, which took place about 7 years ago. My son was listening when all of a sudden he chimes in and says, "Yeah, I was there at your wedding." We tell him he wasn't because he wasn't even born yet. He insists that he was there and that he watched the whole thing from up in the sky. My husband and I thought it was a little strange, but brushed it off. Just recently he asked me what grave was I in before I was here. I told him he wasn't in a grave, and he insists that he was in a grave. I questioned him a little further, and he said something like, "I was in a grave, then I was here with you." Super creepy coming from the mouth of a kid. Yes, it is. And a lot of times, some children will have memories of that, and they'll bring that out too. And it does, it'll definitely wake you up if you're not used to hearing that kind of stuff. I mean, me as dabbling in paranormal investigation, I never really heard anything about past lives. My things were always like, trying to record EVPs, trying to get whatever evidence I could of, what I was there to investigate. Anyway, we're going to take another little break and try to play some of another song, and hopefully the internet cooperates with me. And then I'll come back and read some more stories. Seems to be quite a few on this one website, so that'll keep us busy for a little while. Anyway, this is story. I'm Glen Clark, and yeah, this is Stories. I've got to turn my sound up here. Anyway, this is Stories of the Dark, and I'm Glen Clark, and we'll be right back right after this. And welcome back to Stories of the Dark. I am Glen Clark, and you gotta love the internet. You know, with their plays about 2 minutes worth of song, but that's okay because shorter the break, the more stories we can get in. So anyway, let's. While I was on that break, I looked for another website. It's called it's ReadersDigest.com or RD.com. These are stories of children who accounts from children about being reincarnated. So. This was written by, I'll just go ahead and read it says, inspiring stories, chilling reincarnation stories, meet 3 children who lived before. So, girl by the name of Stacy Horn says, Professor Jim Tucker thinks that past lives are possible. Here are the 3 startling accounts of children who may have been reincarnated. The names of boys and their family members were changed to protect privacy. When I was your age, I changed your diaper, said the dark-haired boy to his father. Ron looked down at his smiling son, who had not yet turned 2. He thought it was a very strange thing to say, but he figured he had misheard him. But as baby Sam made similar remarks over the next few months, Ron and his wife Kathy gradually pieced together an odd story. Sam believed that he was his deceased grandfather, Ron's late father, who had returned to his family. More intrigued than alarmed, Ron and Kathy asked, Sam, how did you come back? He said, I just went whoosh and came out the portal, he responded. Although Sam was a precocious child, he'd been speaking in full sentences from the age of 18 months. His parents were stunned to hear him use a word like portal, and they encouraged him to say more. They asked Sam if he had any siblings, and he replied that he had a sister who turned into a fish. Who turned her into a fish? Some bad guys. She died. Eerily enough, Sam's grandfather had a sister who had been murdered 60 years earlier. Her body was found floating in the San Francisco Bay. Ron and Kathy then gently asked Sam, do you know how you died? Sam jerked back and slapped the top of his head as if in pain. 1 year before Sam was born, his grandfather had died of a cerebral hemorrhage. Wow. Now that's a cool story. That one's cool. It says, and the next one here says, is reincarnation real? Today, 24% of Americans, or more than 75 million people across all religions, believe in reincarnation, according to a Pew Forum on Religion and Public Life poll. A separate survey reports that roughly 1 in 10 people can recall his or her own past life. In October, the Dr. Oz show covered a reality of reincarnation and 2 reality TV series on the topic, and currently airing LMN's Ghost Inside My Child, about children with past life memories. I think I remember seeing that story. It's back a couple of years ago, so these may be some dated stories, but I remember seeing something about on that particular channel about this particular program. So anyway, continuing. See about the Ghosts Inside My Child, about children with past life memories and reincarnated past lives in which people go under hypnosis to discover their earlier existence. Why this fascination? Part of reincarnation's appeal has to do with its hopeful underlying promise that we can do better in our next lives. With reincarnation, there is always another opportunity, explains Stafford Betty, a professor of religious studies at California State University, Bakersfield, and the author of The Afterlife Unveiled. The universe takes on a merciful hue. It's a great improvement over the doctrine of eternal hell. Yet, despite the popular interest, few scientists give reincarnation much credence. They regard it as a field filled with charlatans and scams and tall tales of having once been royalty. Reincarnation is an intriguing psychological phenomenon, says Christopher C. French, a professor of psychology at Goldsmiths University of London, who heads a unit that studies claims of paranormal experiences. But I think it is far more likely that such apparent memories are in fact false memories rather than accurate memories of events that were explained in a past life. For more than 45 years, a team at the Division of Perceptual Studies at the University of Virginia has been collecting stories of people who can recall their past lives, and if the professors determine that there is some merit to these memories, their findings will call into question the idea that our humanity ends with our death. Now, see, that's where I like to keep things like on the skeptic side of things. I don't like to automatically believe that, like I said in my last podcast, paranormal investigation I did on haunted objects. In fact, well, that was the topic of the show, but I did an investigation on a flower pot that it was some people that had contacted me, said that they had lights going on and off. They heard sounds. They described all this stuff to me, and I went in, especially with the lights turning off and on. I wanted to just be like, okay, and I even told them that I'm gonna be checking to make sure that there's no nothing wrong with the electricity, nothing like that, because I don't automatically assume that it is something paranormal. But so that's where being the skeptic or having that can help out, like with stuff like this. So the next story I'm going to read for you is called "Mommy, I'm So Homesick." Among the UVA University of Virginia case studies is the story of an Oklahoma boy named Ryan. A few years ago, the 4-year-old woke up screaming at 2 in the morning. Over the preceding months, he had been pleading with his bewildered mother, Cindy, to take him to the house where he'd lived before. In tears, he'd beg her to return him to his glittering life in Hollywood, complete with a big house, a pool, and fast cars. That was so fabulous, he once said, "I can't live in these conditions. My last home was much better." Interesting. So, when Cindy went into her son's room that night, Ryan kept repeating the same words. "Mommy, I'm so homesick," as she tried to comfort him and rock him to sleep. He was like a little old man who couldn't remember all the details of his life. He was so frustrated and sad, Cindy says. They came to a photo from a 1932 film, and the boy said, "That guy's me, the old me." The next morning she went to the library, borrowed a pile of books about old Hollywood, and brought them home. With Ryan in her lap, Cindy went through the volumes. She was hoping the pictures might soothe him. Instead, he became more and more excited as they looked at one particular book. When they came to the still of a scene from a 1932 movie called Night After Night, he stopped her. "Mama," he shouted, pointing to one of the actors who wasn't identified. "That guy's me, the old me." "I was shocked," Cindy admits. "I never thought that we'd find a person that he thought he was," but he was equally relieved. Ryan had talked about his other life and been so unhappy. and now we had something to go on. Although neither Cindy nor her husband believed in reincarnation, she went back to the library the next day and checked out a book about children who possessed memories of their past lives. At the end of it was a note from the author, Professor Jim Tucker, saying that he wanted to hear from the parents of kids with similar stories. Cindy sat down to write him a letter. So the next one here, that one again ended abruptly, so that's still a good story. So the next one here is called The Ghost Hunters. Tucker was a child psychiatrist in a private practice when he heard about the reincarnation research being conducted by Ian Stevenson, founder and director of the Division of Perceptual Studies at University of Virginia. He was intrigued and began working with the division in 1996. 6 years later, when Dr. Stevenson retired, Dr. Tucker took over as the leader of the division's past life research. The UVA team has gathered more than 2,500 documented cases of children from all over the world who have detailed memories of former lives, including that of a California toddler who was surprisingly good, with a surprisingly good golf swing, who said he once been a legendary athlete, Bobby Jones. A Midwestern 5-year-old who shared some of the same memories and physical traits: blindness in his left eye, a mark on his neck, a limp, and a long deceased brother, and a girl in India who woke up one day and began speaking fluently in a dialect she never heard before. Dr. Tucker describes these cases in his book, Return to Life: Extraordinary Cases of Children Who Remember Their Past Lives. The children in the UVA collection typically began talking about their previous lives when they were 2 or 3 years old and stopped by the age of 6 or 7. This is around the same time that we all lose our memories of early childhood, Dr. Tucker says. When he first learns about a subject, he checks for fraud, deliberate or unconscious, by asking 2 questions. Do the parents seem credible? And could the child have picked up memories? I lost my place here. Pick up memories through TV, overheard conversations, or the ordinary or other ordinary means. See, he's using the skeptics thing here, which I like. If he can rule out fraud, he and his team interview the child and his or her family to get a detailed account about the previous life. Then the researchers try to find a deceased person whose life matches the memories. This last part is essential because otherwise the child's story would be just a fantasy. Close to 3/4 of the cases investigated by a team are solved, meaning that a person from the past matching the child's memories is identified. In addition, nearly 20% of the kids in the UVA cases have naturally occurring marks or impairments that match scars or injuries on the past person. One boy recalled being shot and possessed 2 birthmarks, a large ragged one over his left eye and a small round one on the back of his head, which lined up like a bullet's entrance and exit wounds. In the case of Ryan, the boy longing for a Hollywood past, an archivist pored over books in a film library until she found a person who appeared to be a man he singled out. Hollywood agent Marty Martin, who made an unbilled cameo in Night After Night. After Cindy spoke to Dr. Tucker, he interviewed Ryan, and then the family contacted Martin's daughter. She met with Dr. Tucker, Ryan, and Cindy along with public records. She confirmed more than 50 details that Ryan had reported about her father's life. From his work history to the location and contents of his home, Cindy felt tremendous relief when she was told that her son's story matched Martin's. She says, he wasn't crazy. There really was another family. And another story here I'd like to share with you, and then we'll go ahead and wrap things up. It's called Plane on Fire. With TV producers who taught Dr. Tucker about the best-known recent reincarnation case study. In 2002, he was contacted to work for and appear on a show about reincarnation. The program never aired, and was told about James Leininger, a 4-year-old Louisiana boy who believed that he was once a World War II pilot who had been shot down over Iwo Jima. Bruce and Andrea Leininger first realized that James had these memories when he was 2 and woke up from a nightmare yelling, "Airplane crash, plane on fire, little man can't get out." He also knew details about World War II aircraft, and it would seem impossible for a toddler to know. For instance, when Andrea referred to an object on the bottom of a toy plane as a bomb, James corrected her by saying it was a drop tank. Another time, he and his parents were watching a History Channel documentary, and the narrator called a Japanese plane a Zero. James insisted it was a Tony. In both cases, he was right. The boy said he had also been named James in his previous life, and he'd flown off a ship named Natoma. The Leiningers discovered a World War II aircraft carrier by the name USS Natoma Bay. In his squadron was a pilot named James Hudson, who had been killed in action over the Pacific. James talked incessantly about his plane crashing, and he was disturbed by nightmares a few times a week. His desperate mother contacted past life therapist Carol Bowman for help. Bowman told Andrea not to dismiss what James was saying and to assure him that whatever happened had occurred in another life and body, and he was safe now. Andrea followed her advice, and James's dreams diminished. His parents co-authored Soul Survivor, a 2009 book about their family story. James knew details about World War II aircraft that would seem impossible for a toddler to know. Professor French, who was familiar with Dr. Tucker's work, says the main problem with his investigating is that the research typically begins long after the child has been accepted as a genuine reincarnation by his or her family and friends. About James Leininger, French says, although his parents insisted they never watched World War II documentaries or talked about military history, we do know that at 18 months of age, James was taken to a flight museum where he was fascinated by World War II planes. In all probability, the additional details were unintentionally implanted by his parents and by a counselor who was a firm believer in reincarnation. Dr. Tucker says that his additional documentation for many of James Leininger's statements, and they were made before anyone in the family had heard of James Hudson or the USS Natoma Bay. French responds that child's utterances are often ambiguous and open to interpretation. For example, perhaps James said something that sounded a bit like Natoma. Bruce Leininger, James' father, understand French's disbelief. I was the original skeptic, he says, but the information James gave was so striking and unusual. If someone wants to look at the facts and challenge them, they're welcome to examine everything we have. Bruce laughs at the idea that he and his wife planted the memories, saying, you try telling a 2-year-old what to believe. You're not going to be able to give them a script. And that's again, that's interesting. They he used the skeptics thing. That's always good to have as is to have an open mind on that. So anyway, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up here. So until next time, or until or if the internet decides it wants to cooperate with me, from now on we'll be able to do these more often. So again, if you have any comments, I'd like for you to share them with me. Share some ideas on how I could improve. I know over time I'll get better, but I'm still new to this. But I'm doing. But I enjoy what I do. I enjoy, making you, the listener, happy. So if you have any suggestions for topics, please let me know. Or as I get moving along and more high tech, as it were, then I'll be trying to do some interviews with guests. Have guests on the program, but for now we'll just keep it simple and share stories. So again, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Send me your emails at storiesofthedark1@gmail.com. That's storiesofthedark1@gmail.com. And all of this information will be posted on this video. So I thank you for joining me for this edition of Stories of the Dark. I am Glen Clark, and we'll see you next time. Have a good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be. So again, this is Stories of the Dark.